Ladies and gentlemen, this is literally my favorite type of video to make. Occasionally, once every couple of weeks or so, I take questions from the community about topics you want to see me discuss, and you guys leave some very interesting questions, and I give, hopefully, very insightful answers. Now, I've got about 10 or 11 questions that I've picked out from your guys' 25 questions. I'm going to split them up into two parts. So this is part one. We've got questions in this video, surprisingly, about the Bitcoin bear market. Now, people are thinking about the bear market. It's very good that you're having that foresight because we're still in the bull market, but I actually have a very interesting trend to show you in regards to a potential bear market bottom price, which is surprisingly accurate. And I'm not one to make big claims like that, but I think we can be relatively confident in a bear market bottom price with just a few assumptions built in. So if we assume the 4-year cycle keeps playing out, and if we assume that Bitcoin tops out in a certain price range, which I'll discuss in this video, we can be very, very confident in a bear market bottom prediction. So we'll discuss that. That's first up. Stick around for that for sure. Got a question about the 4-year cycle, whether or not it will continue into a super cycle or actually just remain as normal. Question about Ethereum and the altcoin season. Question about how to choose good altcoins for the potential altcoin season, which we're not seeing yet, by the way, but we are seeing good signs. Questions about Red September and whether or not I believe in it. And then a question here about what would constitute a 4-year cycle break versus a deviation from the 4-year cycle. Those are two different things. The rest of the questions, you can see them here. I'm briefly skimming past them, will be answered in the upcoming part 2, which will be posted in, I think, around 16 hours from the time this video drops. So stick around for that. Guys, big questions here. Let's get into it. Before we do so, please check out the Bitunix Exchange. A lot of people ask me what exchange I use as a trader. I use the Bitunix Exchange, and I don't have a contract with them. I haven't signed anything with them. I don't work for them. I advertise them on my own accord. With my referral link down below, you can get a 15% trading fee discount permanently attached to your account, as well as up to 8,000 USDT in rewards just by signing up with my link down below. Why would you sign up? Well, it's global, it's non-KYC, it's never been hacked before, it's got all of the functions and pairs that you would expect for a major exchange. For that reason, I use it. And I implore you to consider using it as well. Sign up with my link to help out the channel, help out yourself. Cheers. Okay guys, I've got timestamps down below with all the questions and the part of the video in which they're answered. Let's get into the first one here. Now it's split up into two questions here by Sparrowhawk. First question is, what will the approximate Bitcoin bottom be in the upcoming bear market? Now, we can be surprisingly accurate about this question, and it's quite interesting because we haven't even seen the top yet. All we need to assume is that the 4-year cycle will play out in some capacity, and we can get a relatively accurate indication of where the next bear market bottom will be. That relies on one very major important thing. The only way we could possibly even know what the bottom could potentially be is by knowing that the 4-year cycle will remain. Now, without the 4-year cycle, we have no idea because the traditional concept of a 4-year cycle bear market through which we have data and through which we have things to extrapolate forward would disappear. So if the 4-year cycle breaks, we have no idea what the bottom will be because we don't even know what a bear market will look like. Right? Maybe if the 4-year cycle broke, we'd go away from the traditional 1-year-long bear markets and we'd just have a 3-month bear market, or we'd have a 3-year bear market. We wouldn't know. We'd have no idea what would happen. We'd be completely in the dark. So let's just assume, for the sake of your question, that the 4-year cycle continues. The second thing we need to know where the bear market bottom will be is know vaguely where the bull market top would be. Right? If we know where the bull market top is, we can do a basic drawdown analysis from prior cycles and try and extrapolate that forward. So for example, we know that in cycle 1, from bull market top to bear market bottom, we had a drawdown of about 86 or 87%. In cycle 2, it was 84%. And in cycle 3, it was about, 77, 78%. So we have 86, 84, 78. So basically, each cycle, the drawdown gets a little bit lower. So I've gone ahead and punched those numbers in right above the cycle there relative to. So 86% drawdown, 84% drawdown, 78% drawdown. From 86 to 84 is a 2% difference. From 84 to 78 is a 6% difference. Let's take the number in between 6 and 2, which is 4, and assume there would be an extra minus 4% drawdown from 78. And so we'd see a 74% drawdown in this cycle here, just extrapolating this vague trend forward. And of course it is vague, but that's the best we can do with only 3 data points. So we would see roughly a 74% drawdown from the cyclical high in this cycle to the bear market bottom. Now, let's just go ahead and guess where that high will be. Well, there's a couple things we can do to guess that. One of them is we can actually look at trends that already exist. So if we're taking the worst case scenario, right, we're taking the absolute worst case scenario for Bitcoin from a 4-year cycle perspective, the top Bitcoin would be at about $130,000. And how do I come to that? Well, let's explain that now. And this chart will be relevant later in the video as well. This is a logarithmic regression channel on Bitcoin. The angle of ascension between tops and bottoms halves each cycle. All we need to do is extrapolate that halving forward and see there would be about a 7% angle of ascension from this top in 2021 to the top this cycle. That 7% angle of ascension, when accounted for the cyclical top, which should be in around October this year, as per the 4-year cycle, would take Bitcoin to about 130,000, maybe slightly over 130,000. So if we were to see a $130,000 top, and then we were to see a drawdown of, let's just say, 74%, that would take us to Bitcoin a price of around $36,000. Now, we can actually cross-validate that price by looking at the channel itself, okay? If we go to the channel, we know it's relevant for cyclical tops, but it's also relevant for cyclical bottoms, right? We've got the same kind of trend going on here where you halve the angle of ascension each cycle from bottom to bottom. And if we go to the cyclical bottom, which should be, according to the 4-year cycle, about a year after the cyclical top, right? So let's just say October or November 2026, that would be around here. We can see that the channel would suggest we'd be at around 32,000. So we've got the regular extrapolation of data points from cycle tops to cycle bottoms saying around 36,000. And we've got the channel itself saying around 32,000, which is either a massive coincidence or could just be, maybe that's just what's going to happen. Now, obviously, we'd prefer if Bitcoin went a little bit higher. You know, if Bitcoin went to something like 150,000 instead, and then we saw a 74% drawdown from 150,000, that would take Bitcoin to something like, 39,000. But, breaking this channel to the upside and breaking the top part of the channel doesn't necessarily mean the bottom part's broken. They're almost separate. Like, they look like they're part of the same big channel, and they are, but they're separately valid, these two lines here. So the top part breaking doesn't mean the bottom part needs to break. We could actually break the top of this channel, top out much higher than 130K, and then come right back down to the bottom of the channel for the bear market and still hold it. And then that line would just be an independent line. So I would say that if we do see the 4-year cycle continue, a regular bear market after the 4-year cycle would take us to somewhere between, $32,000 and $40,000. And I think that's very, very realistic. Hopefully, we don't need to go that low, but at this point, the data says that's very realistic. Now, obviously, if every question was as long as an answer as that one, we're not going to get through this video, so we'll try to speed it up a little bit. But unfortunately, we've got another huge question here. I mean, this question I'm about to read out, could basically bring a 30-minute video around, but I'll try and do it in less than 5. Do you think the 4-year cycle will continue or end into a super cycle? Obviously, that's a massive question. All right, well, a couple things about the 4-year cycle. The 4-year cycle is based on dates, not prices. So I trust the 4-year cycle. And the reason I trusted the 4-year cycle is because it's never failed, right? Every single cycle so far, it has played out on both a bull market and bear market bottom perspective. So it's not just, it's worked 3 times. No, it's worked 6 times. It's worked with bull market tops 3 times and bear market bottoms 3 times. So this is a very, very real thing. 6 data points with 100% accuracy and win rate is a real thing. And there's been people over the years who have betted against the 4-year cycle, including big names such as Benjamin Cohen, who believed in lengthening cycles last cycle with very limited data. And those big names, who are no doubt quite intelligent people, were proven wrong. Crypto Crew University is another one who believed in his 5.3 theory, proven wrong again, right? The fact of the matter is, everyone who hasn't trusted the 4-year cycle in the entire history of Bitcoin has been proven wrong. So your question, do I think the 4-year cycle will end or not, is kind of irrelevant. Doesn't really matter what I think. What matters is the fact that it's a reality. It's a real trend. It's got 100% accuracy so far. And so I'd be stupid to bet against it without any actual data of it breaking, right? If we start to see evidence, proper evidence, not just, the rate delays, that's not evidence. That's baseless theories. That's baseless conspiracy based on speculation, or you're assuming rate cuts will have an effect on Bitcoin's 4-year cycle without any actual evidence, because historically rate cuts have not had an effect on Bitcoin's 4-year cycle. In fact, in 2017, during the bull market, rates were actively increasing and Bitcoin still saw a valid 4-year cycle top and bottom. Okay, so this is not evidence, it's data, and it's you're using it in a baseless way and making assumptions about the 4-year cycle with the data. The only thing the 4-year cycle cares about is the date of the top and the date of the bottom. So far, that's intact. Now, are there theories, are there speculations I could make that potentially would say that the 4-year cycle will extend or break into a super cycle? Yes, there are. I can look at things like global liquidity index, and I can see that the global liquidity index spiking has a direct causation to assets rising. Okay, and I can see that the global liquidity index is spiking very late in this cycle. It only started spiking in January. In 2021, it started spiking a year and a half before the top. In 2017, it started spiking a year before the top. This time, it's only started spiking about 10 months before the potential 4-year cycle top. I can say that that's evidence the cycle will extend. But it's not evidence the cycle will extend, right? All it is a data point. And that's not evidence. Evidence that the 4-year cycle will extend will only come when the 4-year cycle actually extends, because the only data point the 4-year cycle cares about is dates. It's how many days between X and Y. That's all it cares about. The best part about the 4-year cycle is that you don't actually lose money by trusting it. And I'll tell you why. The fact that it's based on dates as opposed to price means that you don't need to just blindly sell in October, right? So when we get to October and when we get to the alleged 4-year cycle top, regardless of how likely it is to play out or not, when we get to the alleged 4-year cycle top in October, we don't just need to sell blindly in October. You only need to sell when there's weakness in October, if there's weakness in October. If we get to October and we see RSI breakdowns, we get to October, we see volume decreasing massively, we see altcoins starting to crash left, right, and center, then we can start to put the pieces together and realize, okay, this looks like a top, and given the fact it's in October, which is in context of the 4-year cycle, the cyclical top, this is probably a 4-year cycle top, and then we can sell. When I say trust the cycle, I don't mean blindly sell in October. I mean get very cautious around October, and if we see weakness, run for the hills. So you actually don't lose anything by trusting the 4-year cycle at all. You only gain. So it's very silly to me when people sit here and say, oh, the 4-year cycle is going to break, it's going to break. Who cares? Who cares what your opinion is, right? We'll see. We'll see in 2 months. And if I trust the cycle, I won't lose any more money than anyone else because I'll be selling at the same breakdown point I usually sell as per TA. I'll just have the extra context. So do I think the 4-year cycle will continue? I honestly don't know. I think if we're looking at the data, everything is still perfectly intact. The 4-year cycle will break at some point, whether it be this cycle or the next, but I know that the best move you can make on the chessboard right now is to trust the 4-year cycle. There's always evidence that it will break. There's always things like the global liquidity index spiking to the upside quite late. There's always things like rates, being paused for a while. This exists every cycle. Every cycle there's new evidence, but every cycle so far it's maintained itself. So we'll see. How long will the Ethereum season last, and do you think we'll see an altcoin season this year? The money flow cycle on cryptocurrency is very straightforward. Money starts out in USDT in the bear market. People have sold from the bull market. They move their money into Bitcoin first during the bear market. Bitcoin picks up. Bitcoin skyrockets and the money moves into Ethereum. That is the phase we are up to right now, right? We are seeing Ethereum taking off against Bitcoin. It only started in around April this year. Ethereum is upwards 250% massively since April, while Bitcoin since April is only upwards about 70%, and the altcoin market, as measured by the total 3, is only upwards as well, about 70%. So Bitcoin and altcoins are doing the same thing on a generalized scale, and Ethereum is outperforming them massively on a generalized scale, like almost 4 times outperforming the Bitcoin and altcoin market on a generalized scale. So we're very clearly in the Ethereum leg. Next comes the altcoin leg. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about whether we will even see that, because the altcoin market has behaved very strangely this cycle. We have not seen altcoins do as well as they've usually done. We can very clearly measure that by the fact that the altcoin season usually lasts about 322 days. Bitcoin dominance, by the way, is the chart I'm looking at right now, and Bitcoin dominance measures, as per the name, the strength of Bitcoin in relation to the rest of the market in percentage format. Now, when that percentage drops, that means that altcoins are outperforming Bitcoin, fundamentally. And so the drop, historically, the altcoin season, has lasted 322 days in 2017. It lasted 322 days as well, or roughly the same amount in 2021. And in this cycle, if it was to last 322 days, as per a cyclical top of October, it would have had to have started last year in November. But we didn't see that. We saw Bitcoin dominance continue going upwards. We saw altcoins continuing going downwards, or at least doing very badly, as per what they've usually done. And there's various reasons for this. The main reason, in my view, is because Bitcoin itself, which is the leader of the market, has just not performed in a way that is conducive to altcoin performance. So, for example, in 2021, when we went straight upwards for months on end, that's very sharp, very aggressive. That breeds a lot of hype. Hype is what altcoins thrive on. We haven't seen that level of hype this cycle. We've seen a step to the upside, 7 months of consolidation, a step to the upside, 9 months of consolidation, 6 months of consolidation. These long, drawn-out sideways movements kill all hype in the market and lead to altcoins being forgotten. So there is actually doubt as to whether we will even see an altcoin season at all this cycle, but I think we probably will in some capacity. I think that we need to see Bitcoin do something big for it to occur, though. Right now, the money is in Ethereum. That's a good step in the right direction. It means we are moving down the regular money flow cycle chain. Altcoins are next. But in order for that next step to be taken, I think we need to see Bitcoin trigger something. We need to see another macro breakout on Bitcoin, whether it be a breakout from this channel here or whatever. I think we need to see some big move from Bitcoin that will ultimately lead it to happen. If we do see an altcoin season, as per regular 4-year cycle, we don't have as much time left as last couple of cycles, so we won't see a big one in terms of length. The good news is we don't need to see altcoin seasons last long for them to be effective. So, for example, even though the altcoin season here in 2017 went for about a year, really, and the same story in 2021, they both went for about a year, so that was a long period of time for altcoins to do well. The fact is, most of those gains on altcoins against Bitcoin happened in a matter of a couple of months, right? So we saw a couple of weeks on a few occasions of altcoins really skyrocketing, and that's where altcoins really did well. So we only need a few months, really, for altcoins to make moves. So hopefully we can see that money start filtering down into altcoins. There are very early signs of it occurring, like on a very local level. For example, since the 2nd of August, altcoins are upwards 21%. And since the 2nd of August, which isn't a very long period of time, by the way, but since the 2nd of August, Bitcoin is only upwards about 11%. So altcoins are starting to pull away. There could be early glimpses, for example, of an altcoin season beginning here, but nothing really confirmed yet. If we did see an altcoin season, just bringing it back to the question, it wouldn't override the Ethereum season. So Ethereum is doing very, very well against Bitcoin right now, and it's doing very, very well against altcoins. That's obviously a great step in the right direction of an altcoin season, but when money starts flowing into altcoins aggressively, that doesn't mean Ethereum stops performing well. It just means that altcoins start doing better. So Ethereum would still be doing better than Bitcoin, even in an altcoin season. And the reason for that, just bringing it back to the money flow cycle here, is that Ethereum is closer to altcoins than Bitcoin is to altcoins on this money flow cycle. So Ethereum would be doing second best, okay? And then everything will crash, money will go back into USDT, we'll see a bear market. That's typically how it works. If we did see an altcoin season, again, we have to trust the 4-year cycle. It probably lasts until about a month after the Bitcoin top, and I could bring up a chart that would explain why I think that. But I think this video would just drag on so long if I kept doing that over and over again. Essentially, just to summarize it for you, generally speaking, in regular bull markets, Bitcoin tops out about a month earlier than Ethereum and altcoins. So fingers crossed for an altcoin season there. It's definitely still on the table. What is your process for choosing altcoins during an altcoin season? What are you looking for when you make that decision? Well, first and foremost, I never, ever, ever pick altcoins outside of an altcoin season. And I don't think we're seeing an altcoin season yet. I really don't. I think we're seeing very early signs of an altcoin season. Potentially, you can start to take a stab if you'd like to at a high risk. But right now, this is still an Ethereum season. So let's be clear about that. But in terms of coins I have on a watch list, what I'm doing when I'm looking for coins to put on a watch list for a potential altcoin season is I'm looking predominantly at structure on the price chart versus the Bitcoin pair structure. Okay, most people watching this video probably never look at Bitcoin pairs. You need to look at Bitcoin pairs, especially when picking altcoins for an altcoin season, because what matters with an altcoin is not so much the regular USDT chart. That's all well and good. What matters is how the altcoin has been performing against Bitcoin. We are not in an altcoin season yet. So therefore, most altcoin charts are getting destroyed against Bitcoin, right? That is weakness against Bitcoin, meaning they're underperforming against Bitcoin, right? We need coins that are outperforming Bitcoin or at least remaining level against Bitcoin in a Bitcoin dominant market environment. That is a show of strength. When an altcoin is doing better than Bitcoin in a Bitcoin dominated market environment, that's a sign of strength, or at least when it's holding its own. There's many altcoins out there you can look at that look okay on the price chart, but you flip over to the Bitcoin pair and they're just absolutely tanking. That shows weakness, that shows a lack of resilience. You want coins with resilience. I look at Pepe, for example, and I see solid structure, so solid foundation on the price chart. You can see the clear support there. You can see even a potential macro triangle, something like this forming on the price chart. You can see on the momentum indicator, the RSI, a clear momentum breakout sign right there in white that I've drawn in. You flip over to the Bitcoin pair and you see basically the same thing you see on the price chart. Very little change there. Still the same solid macro foundation, meaning it's doing well against Bitcoin. And given the fact we are still in a Bitcoin season, that means it's actually doing better than most altcoins against Bitcoin. You've got the same kind of macro triangle formation that basically the Bitcoin pair looks very similar to the price chart pair, which means that Pepe is outperforming the rest of altcoins right now and even holding its own against Bitcoin. This is a kind of coin you'd want to be looking at quite closely if that altcoin season does kick off, because it's been doing well even outside of the altcoin season. So you can only imagine what would happen if the hype returns. It shows that people who hold this coin, funnily enough, actually have pretty strong hands, which is hilarious given it's a meme coin. Just an example, not necessarily saying this is what I'm looking at, but it's certainly one that looks quite decent. It's a good example to use. So to answer your question, when I'm choosing altcoins, I'm looking at how altcoins have performed against Bitcoin when they haven't been in an altcoin season. I'm looking for, back to the price chart here, structure, clear foundational lows of support that's retested multiple times and has not broken. It's got this foundational level, which offers kind of two purposes, one of which is a bounce zone, one of which is the fact that we have a clear structure forming on top of it, a clear pattern that we can break out forming on top of it. Another one, by the way, is that we have a level we know, if this breaks, we're screwed. We know we can get out, run for the hills. We have a clear sell point. So there's many uses to having a clear structural foundation like we have on Pepe here, on both the price chart and on the Bitcoin pair. Final question here. Do you believe in a big temporary pullback in September? It's happened in every other bull market to date. This is the red September theory. There's a theory going around. It's been going around for years. In fact, I first discussed it in 2021, which basically says Septembers are red. Septembers lead to corrections and downturns across cryptocurrency and traditional markets. Now, I'm not going to speak for trad markets, but I will speak for crypto. Yeah, it is kind of true. There is a general trend here that Septembers are more red than green. We've seen 7 red Septembers or 8 red Septembers in crypto's history. We've seen 4 green Septembers. So, 33% chance of green, 66% chance of red. Is it a big deal? Not really. Is it overplayed? Yeah, it's certainly overplayed. But is it kind of true? Yeah, I suppose it's got some truth to it. But it's worth noting, guys, it's like even though there is a bit of a trend that Septembers are red, if we're looking at the average September return, so the average monthly return in September, it's minus 3.7%. It's barely anything. It's not like, every September we crash downwards. In fact, we've only ever seen 2 double-digit red Septembers. That was in 2014 and 2019, both of which were bear market years. So this is not really something you should be exceptionally concerned about. It is generally where we see a pullback, but it's not concrete, it's not certain, it's not guaranteed. I would trust the regular charts more than I would trust a random saying about a red September. You will also remember people say, sell in May and walk away. That's a very big one. Sell in May and walk away. Well, guess what, guys? That's a fake, because May is actually a very bullish month, right? It's positive 8% on average, and we've seen more green Mays than we have red Mays in Bitcoin's history. So, let's be real here. Let's trust the charts. The last 2 Septembers have been green, by the way. In terms of the charts, yeah, we are at strong resistance. Yeah, we could very well see a rejection and correction throughout September, and that would leave time for another and final parabolic move into October and potentially into early November. So it is possible but it's not something I would predict just based on a saying, because at the end of the day, the same thing exists with May, sell in May and walk away, and that's been proven wrong. So are September's generally a little bit more red? Yeah. But is it something to be actually concerned about properly? No, because even if it is red, generally speaking, it's very gradually red and not a massive crash. So guys, that will be it for this video. Part 2 will be dropping in about 16 hours. We'll have the rest of the questions, big ones, remaining in part 2. So please go ahead and subscribe and wait for the next upload, and then check out that video when it comes out. I'd appreciate that. And I've got something for you. I mentioned it at the start, but I mentioned it again at the end of the video. It's the Bitunix Exchange. A lot of people ask me what exchange I use as a trader. I use the Bitunix Exchange, and I don't have a contract with them. I haven't signed anything with them. I don't work for them. I advertise them on my own accord. With my referral link down below, you can get a 15% trading fee discount permanently attached to your account, as well as up to 8,000 USDT in rewards just by signing up with my link down below. Why would you sign up? Well, it's global. It's non-KYC. It's never been hacked before. It's got all the functions and pairs that you would expect for a major exchange. For that reason, I use it. And I implore you to consider using it as well. Sign up with my link to help out the channel, help out yourself. Cheers.